I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Okay. So before I go on to talking about the particular pieces and parts of this OSH code, I think I'll just quickly establish why we are talking about this code in this particular context. Since the lockdown has begun, we all have seen how the migrant workers and workers in general, how they have suffered.
তোমার ফোন ওকে একটু দিয়ে দাও তো ভিডিও দিয়ে
Okay.
How
Please,
they have
please switch off the microphones.
right now we have seen not only the kind of apathy that the migrant workers have faced, we have also seen the kind of complete lack of support to them, systemic support, I mean. There has been a lot of support that has started from the civil society, but in terms of looking at what does the policy and what do the laws say about rights of migrant workers in any industry, we really don't seem to have any guidelines. And also further, there doesn't seem to be any policy framework holding governments responsible for taking care of safety of the migrant workers. So in that context, we started looking at the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code bill that was tabled in Lok Sabha in 2019. Mishti Verma, who is here with us on this call today, she did this analysis for us, and we asked her to look at this code in terms of what does the code say about migrant workers in various industries, and what might be the link with any kind of anti-human trafficking policy framework. I won't be sharing all of that analysis. I am taking out some parts of that analysis which talk about specifically about migrant workers' rights, and that's the context in which this presentation and session needs to be located. Just to give you an overview, I will share with you a brief introduction of the bill, and I will share with you parts of the OSH code that relate to interstate migration and rights of migrant workers, the provisions in existing labor legislations that are missing from the code, and thereafter sharing with you stakeholders' criticisms of the code and what does the Parliamentary Standing Committee therefore have recommended, taking in consideration those criticisms. And then I'll share with you possible impact on 5 specific groups of workers. Thereafter, we will move on to the question and answer session. The OSH code bill, the stated intent by the government is that it seeks to regulate health and safety conditions of workers, and it replaces 13 labor laws relating to safety, health and working conditions of workers. And it is important to note that both Contract Labor Law and Interstate Migrant Workers Act both are included in that list of 13 labor laws. So once this code becomes passed into a law, all of these 13 labor laws will cease to exist. Only the provisions in the OSH code will prevail. And the domestic workers are not kept in purview of this law. This bill is under the purview of Ministry of Labor and Employment. It was introduced in the Lok Sabha on 23rd July in 2019. Thereafter, referred to a standing committee to discuss the code in detail, and the standing committee submitted its report to Parliament on February 11th. As of now, it is expected to be tabled in Lok Sabha again in the monsoon session of the Parliament. The 4 key things that is relevant for us that the code says. A, all establishments covered by the code will required to be registered with registering officers with appropriate governments. The code does provide a definition of establishment. However, it does not give much clarity on who will be the appropriate authorities. This is something that the parliamentary committee has already asked for a clarification on. Just a note, I cannot see the chat questions that are being posted. So if anything is important for me to respond to, Saroj, if you can kindly mention that, that will be very useful.
Correct. Yeah, I will mention it.
Thank you. Secondly, it applies to workers in establishments with 10 or more workers. Any establishments which does not have 10 workers at the least on their payroll, this code will not be applicable to them. The central and state governments will be prescribing the welfare facilities, working conditions, and work hours through framing the rules after the bill is passed. Occupational safety boards at the national and state level will be established to advise the governments on what kind of standards to set, what kind of rules and regulations to be set vis-a-vis the enactment of this act. The OSH code provides a definition of employers and employees. And it specifies duties of employers and employees, regardless of the kind of industry or establishment that is being referred to. So the employees are being held accountable to provide a workplace that is free from hazard, providing free annual health examination to employees. And in fact, this code makes it mandatory that even after a worker has stopped working in that establishment, but has been subjected to some disease that has arisen out of their course of employment, some sort of occupational disease, that employee will be held accountable to keep providing the annual health examination continuously. And also the employers are held accountable to inform relevant authorities in the event of a workplace accident that leads to serious injury or death of an employee. In the case of serious injury or death of an employee, the employee is also entitled to receiving certain compensation as per applicable law. Rights and duties of employees: they are to take care of their own health and safety. They are also to obtain information related to safety and health standards from the employer. They are supposed to comply with the specified safety and health standards that will be set by the governments and the employers. And they are supposed to report unsafe situations to the inspector appointed by the central and or state government. Now, before getting into the rights of migrant workers, it's important to mention that while the code gives a definition of contract workers, it does not give a definition of migrant workers. It lobs interstate migrant workers in the same definition as contract workers. However, in different parts of the code, it has talked about what are some of the rights of migrant workers. So facilities to the migrant workers that are supposed to be provided by the employer is suitable conditions of work, keeping in mind that these workers are coming from a different state than the state where they are working at. The employer, as I mentioned earlier, they must report fatal accident or serious bodily injury to any migrant worker to the home state, to the state where they are working, and to the next of kin of workers. The employers are also supposed to provide and maintain suitable residential accommodations for the migrant workers. The code also gives some indication of what does it mean by suitable residential accommodation. So it specifies there should be clean drinking water, there should be power, there should be well ventilated accommodation, etc. And the employer are to provide the prescribed medical facilities and periodical medical examinations free of charge. There is a mention of a displacement allowance which must be paid by the contractor to the migrant worker at the time of recruitment, and it should be equal to 50% of their monthly wages. The code explicitly prohibits contractors from charging any fee or commission from the laborers themselves, directly or indirectly. The contractor is also supposed to provide them with the fair amount for the to and fro journey from their home state to the workplace and back. And this is supposed to be paid to the worker at the time of recruitment. During the journey period, the worker will be entitled to wages as if they are on duty. So what is missing? Because all of these provisions seem very nice and tidy. What is missing is, and these are also some of the criticisms that this bill has received. While state and central governments are talking about framing rules, regulations, methods of monitoring are very loose, they are very lax. All responsibilities are dumped onto employers and contractors with very low penalties. If I give you an example, one of the penalties, suppose a worker dies during the course of their work due to some occupational hazard, the penalty is 2 years of jail and 1 lakh of penalty to be paid by the employer. As of now, in the code, there is no one government duty bearer who is held responsible to inform the home state and the receiving state about the details of the migrant worker when recruiting or when the worker stops working there. There was a provision earlier in the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act of a passbook, which was supposed to give the migrant workers details of name and place of work, period of work, rate of wages, etc. in their own language. This provision has been omitted from this code. We have also heard from different activists and organizations that in the first place, these provisions were never really stringently implemented, even when they were in the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act. Fourthly, the stringency in monitoring that the employers are following the regulations, having all workers on payroll, issuing appointment letters, etc. This stringency is currently not there in the code at all. They are supposed to keep a database with all of these informations, and the employers are supposed to keep sharing the database with the inspectors time to time, and that seems to be the mode of monitoring. If the inspector is supposed to make any visits, it is not made mandatory. No safety and well-being measures for children below 14 who migrate with their families. So nothing has been talked about that in the code. The migrant workers in the informal sector where less than 10 employees are there, they will lose out on all the protection measures. And the worst affected will be the distressed migrants who are vulnerable and often end up working in smaller informal establishments. Also, in its chapter on safety, there has been no consideration of how migrant workers will be protected in the event of emergency or a calamity, and how they would be supported in repatriation to their home, or what would be the employer's responsibility, etc. And this is something that also is missing in our current legislature. The impact of that, all of us are seeing. These are the key criticisms to the OSH code bill that has been raised from various parts of the civil society. No state accountability in coordination of migration, no safe migration support systems, negligible monitoring. There is no data maintenance on interstate migration. No responsibility of that on the state or central government has been assigned. No coverage for unorganized sector workers, and exemptions to government departments engaging contract labor who may also be migrant worker. And this is important. In the government departments, when they engage labor through contractors, and the contractors recruit migrant workers and the interstate migrant workers, it is very unclear whether they will be under the purview of this bill or not. And the parliamentary committee has asked this to be looked into. And there are very unclear definitions of worker and employee, of appropriate authority, of workplace and wages, and of contract labor. And the standing committee thereafter has directed the Ministry of Labor and Employment to clarify the definitions, bring contract labor employed by government offices under the purview of the code, to ensure safety officers for each establishment regardless of their size. As of now, the code says that only establishments with 500 or more workers will get safety officers, and the safety officers have a key role in the implementation of this code. And the biggest one, and the one that we will be discussing on later today, is they have recommended a separate chapter on rights of interstate migrant workers, where their safety and welfare measures must be clearly articulated. There are also something that has been done in the last few weeks. There have been recent changes in labor laws in about 8 states. These states have frozen certain laws, labor laws, that regulate important aspects of safety and working conditions. And this is important for us to note, because these changes, if the notifications are carried out, these changes will be in place for the next 3 years. It is important that these are the 3 major changes that I noted from the various analyses that were published. So these states are saying that labor laws that protect workers in factories, in manufacturing facilities and other establishments, these measures are being relaxed and suspended for the next 3 years. They are also taking away powers of trade unions to negotiate with employers, and working hours has been increased for certain factories. So weekly work hours have been increased from 48 hours to 72 hours, and daily work hours have been increased from 9 hours to 12 hours. The very basic minimum and 6 hours, who will be doing that? Just today morning, I saw several pieces of news that has challenged these changes at the Supreme Court level. Before moving on, I'll stop here. And Saroj, is there anything that I need to respond to?
No, so far, there is no
Okay.
question as such.
So I'll quickly move on to how does this law then, sorry, not the law, how does this bill, if enacted into a law, what would this mean for different kinds of workers? So for the interstate migrant workers, at present, they have no provisions for safety and well-being outside of their site of work. Yes, there are mentions of the allowances. However, whether they are getting these allowances or not, since there is no reference to keeping a data and on that and any audit measures of that, this doesn't seem to, it's unclear how that will be monitored. Also, interstate migration often happens as families. In most cases, the men of the family are shown on payroll. However, the women and the children are also often inculcated into the workforce, and the payment that is made to the family is not based on how many people are working for how many hours, but based on what they are making. So for example, if they are working in brick kilns, their payment would be in terms of how many bricks they have made. Therefore, the provisions that this code talks about regarding wages, regarding work hours, it doesn't take into account the phenomena of how the interstate migration happens. Also, the migrant workers, their rights are treated in the same lines as contract laborers, which leaves out specific concerns around interstate migration. And to be more specific, how interstate migration can be made safer for these workers, that seems to be left out of this code. Uh, so as of now, it seems that everything, to what extent the migration will be safe for these workers, it depends upon the employers and the contractors. In the case of migrant workers who are employed in the construction sector, employed by contractors, who are again in turn employed by the government. I have already talked about this. The code in its current form does not keep the offices of the central and state governments under its purview, because the occupational safety and health provisions for those institutions are already governed by appropriate rules of the government. However, the standing committee has recommended to the Ministry of Labor and Employment to bring more clarity on this aspect in the code itself. The migrant workers between 14 and 18 years, either textile industry in Tamil Nadu or in the domestic workers from Jharkhand, Delhi. So we know of this phenomena in Tamil Nadu, how young adolescents are recruited into the textile sector, and the kind of working conditions that they have to work in, as well as the phenomena of where from Jharkhand to Delhi, adolescent girls are migrating for domestic work through replacement agencies that are not licensed, not registered, and eventually it becomes domestic servitude. They return back home with support from state police or family members, and then the cases are settled out of court because of unwillingness of the police force and other authorities to register these cases as trafficking. These are also not brought under any purview of rights of domestic workers, so that really leaves them out of any kind of purview of safety. I can see Snigdha's question. Is there any specific clause for women like equal payment, sexual harassment, etc.? No, Snigdha. In this particular code, there is no mention of sexual harassment. Presumably, that will be covered by the Act of Sexual Harassment in Workplace. The issue of payment, I believe, is dealt in the wages code, equal wages code that has been passed already. Any provisions for the children of the workers? No, Priyanka, there is nothing this code says on the children of the workers. It is assumed and not clarified that child rights will be covered by the acts and laws and policies on child labor and other child rights acts.
Hello.
Yes.
Pampiji?
Yes,
Yeah, I
Raman.
have one doubt. Yeah, I have doubt. But this is also needed for safety and security of the children of migrant families. Children below the 14 years, particularly you can see 5 years children or 7 years children who are going to schools. But so many industries, they are long away from the local communities. That's why children is coming to schools or Anganwadi centers is very, very difficult for the children. So that's why some of the points are needed for the protection of the safety and protection of the children of migrant families.
Yes, Ramon ji, I would request you to kindly keep a note of this in the chat box, and we will
Yes,
pick
yes,
this up for
yeah,
discussion
yeah.
in the later session. The
Yes,
code
okay.
prescribes a series of measures to ensure that no one under the age of 14 is hired. And among these, there are verifications measures through Aadhaar card, birth certificates, etc., as well as bone ossification tests. It remains to be seen how those can get implemented. The parliamentary committee has noted in their report that workers in certain industries opt to work longer, including the textile industry, uh, more than the prescribed 8 hours so as to earn more. And they have recommended to the Ministry of Labor and Employment to rework the work hour prescription in accordance with the trend. As mentioned earlier, they don't comment on rights of domestic workers. I saw in some reports that the government is working on bringing out a national policy for domestic workers' rights. What does it mean for sex workers? They have been demanding that sex work be recognized as informal labor. However, it is not clear whether they will be considered as part of informal labor under this code. The code actually has received criticism that they leave out major chunks of informal labor sector. Under the provisions marked for the unorganized sector, once that section is on, we can see if sex workers, commercial sex workers are covered under that. However, it is my perception that this will require a lot of advocacy. The code in terms of occupational health, any worker who develops occupational diseases, ailments is supposed to be provided free medical checkup. However, in its list of the occupational diseases that it has listed, there are no sexually transmitted diseases that are listed. So even if commercial sex workers were to get the benefit of this code, any kind of it will not cover their health concerns in its current form. So now we come to this part where we now know that the standing committee has asked the Ministry of Labor and Employment to include this separate chapter on interstate migrant workers' rights, safety and well-being. I would request Roop to take up the next session on deliberating upon what we think should be included in this chapter. But before we go on to that, I will stop sharing my screen and I would like to respond to any questions that may be there. Any questions relating to what I have presented so far?